Suprememagus, Chapter 61. A New Lesson. After finishing his delicious lunch, Lid had 1 hour off. No one had approached his table, and that made him actually very happy. He was very fond of his personal space, not to mention he had no desire of wasting time doing small talk with lots of kids. Despite his physical appearance, Lid's mind was that of a grown-up man that between his 3 lives had lived for almost 40 years. Except for being hormonal to his teenage body and being addicted to oxygen, there was nothing he had in common with his classmates. From that perspective, isolation was a blessing in disguise. If he spoke to no one, it was impossible for anyone to notice how different he was from his peers. He and Solus had already discussed it during the meal, both regretting that, for security reasons, the Academy would not make any book available for the studying until the end of the first day. "It's such a pity," Solus said. "If we had them, we could already put them into Soluspedia, getting light years ahead of the other students. Instant knowledge." "Yeah, but can I understand the importance of this rule? Specialization are exclusive of the 6 big academies. If they just delivered them at the students' homes before the beginning of the year, their contents would be accessible to all the family members. This kind of knowledge can be released without supervision." "And what about once the students get the opportunity to go back home at the end of the trimester?" Lid mentally shrugged. He stood up from the chair and started walking towards his room. "By that time, they already have gained the status of students. According to what Linjos told us in his office, they are both protected and kept under surveillance. My guess is that the books can leave the academy premises. The only thing one can take out are what he has learned or copied in his grimoire. If you love your family, you will not put them into danger by disclosing state secrets that could cost their lives. If you hate them instead, the moment they try to coerce you, you just need to rat them out to get rid of them for good. It's a win-win situation." Once back in his room, Lid called his parents. He had left home only 7 hours ago, yet the enthusiasm they showed him was like he had disappeared for years. "My little baby," Elena was on the verge of tears. "Are they treating you all right? Are you eating properly?" "Yes, Mom, everything is fine." He lied through his teeth. "The professor I met today were all amazing. My classmates are kind of stuck up, but so far so good, not to mention the food. I wish I could bring you some. It's just wonderful." Contrary to his expectation, time flew by, and he was forced to leave Tista in a hurry after giving her a consult about a patient of hers. All the activities related to each year took place on their own floor. The problem was that each floor was so big that getting lost or taking a long detour was pretty easy. In his case, he had miscalculated the time he needed to reach the classroom. Only when he heard resounding gong that announced the beginning of the lesson, he had realized how long he had spent chatting. "The first thing I'm going to reinvent as soon as I become a forge master is a damn wristwatch. How the heck does people keep track of time?" Solus calculated that even going double time, Lid would have not made it, so he was forced to run. To avoid smelling on his first day, he used water magic to collect the sweat in his palm as soon as it formed, sending it straight into Solace's pocket dimension. Despite all his best efforts, he was the last one to arrive. Luckily, though, the professor in charge had yet to show up. According to the schedule, Lid would have met Professor Mart, the very same that had created blood resonance magic. It was a great opportunity to get his attention and maybe, if opportunity arose, share some of his knowledge with him. Having one of the light department's top experts as his backer, or even better as a mentor, could be a real game changer. Be cool and try not to sound desperate, old man, Lee thought to himself. We have a full year ahead together, maybe even two. I need to play my cards right, keep my admission score while improving my status. I don't give a damn about friends. The other students are useless. Allies, on the contrary, can help me keep my family safe from the likes of Duke Hestia and provide me with the resources I'll need to set my own Forge Master laboratory. I can't waste years grinding for gold. I need time to travel and find answer to my resurrection problem. The classroom was much smaller than the one for the mandatory lesson. It was a square room with each side 12 meters. In front of the chalkboard, there was 3 rows of desks separated by small corridors. It could accommodate comfortably up to 50 students, yet, according to Solus, there were only 26 students attending, Lid included. He occupied the closest spot to the chalkboard, sitting near the other students. When they threw a mean glare at him, he just took out the ballot, forcing them to shut up and mind their own business. After what had happened this morning, they didn't dare to move away from him. Not to mention, doing that would mean getting even farther from the chalkboard and the professor. The floor was even, making it already hard to see through all the heads in front of them. The man who walked in the room was outstanding in his own way. He was quite short, barely over 1 meter and 55 centimeters high, at least 60 years old. The top of his head was completely bald. The hair he had left on the sides was snow white, and so were his waxed handlebar mustaches. His belly was so big that it made hard to guess if he was larger than high. That, together with his pure white robe, made him resemble a real-life Humpty Dumpty. Hello, students. I'm Professor Vestor, and I'll guide you through your first steps in the Light Magic Master Healer course. Not everyone was ignorant as Lid. Most of them already knew what Professor Mart looked like. Before Professor Vestor could finish his introduction, the class was filled with saddened groans. His disgruntled expression to such reaction expressed clearly how angered he was by that blatant lack of respect. I'm very sorry to disappoint you, but as you should have predicted, Professor Mart can waste his precious time with the likes of you. The whole Light Magic Research Department rests on his shoulders, so you'll have to settle for me. Words cannot express how it saddens me to notice that even country bumpkins have more manners than the high and mighty nobles. He wasn't referring to just Lid, but to all the students that, thanks to their poor background, had failed to recognize him, looking at him with admiration despite his funny appearance. I have good news and bad news for all of you. The good news is that we won't spend 2 hours in this class. I'll just explain to you the difference between Tier 3 and 4 of healing magic. After that, we will move in the Academy's hospital. There we'll do some trial rounds of our residence patients, giving you the chance to meet both Professor Mart and Professor Manoir if we are lucky enough. The class exploded in cheers and applause. What the heck? Lee thought. Where do they think we are? At the stadium? Back on Earth, my college professor would have skinned them alive for such behavior. Vaster had a very Earth-like expression at the moment. His hands were trembling with rage, dilating his nostrils at the very breath. The bad news, he continued, cutting them short, is that it means I will start evaluating you all right off the bat. Even today's rounds will help us evaluate your skills, separating the gold from shiny trash. The room fell silent. Most of the students in the first row had lost all their enthusiasm. Some were having stomach cramps due to the nervousness. Others seemed on the verge of puking. It wasn't at all as they had imagined their first day of specialization would be. Professor Vaster was delighted by the result of his speech, curling his mustache with a sadistic grin on his face. Let's not waste any more time. I'm sure you can't wait to stop listening to my gibberish and become real healers, like your hero, Professor Mark. Man, I don't need Tier 4 magic to diagnose Professor Vaster's a really bad case of envy syndrome. Being so petty at his age is really sad, Solus said. Yeah, happens when you lose your throne to someone younger and more talented. I feel the same way, Ridley cried, thinking of how lucky his classmates were being born with science manacores without having to work hard for years to reach that level. First of all, who can tell me what are the greatest limitations of tiers 1 to 3 of light magic? Lit raised his hands, but so did everyone else. Vaster chose one of them at random to answer. You, with the snob face, feel free to share with the class, he said, pointing to a girl with shoulder-length black hair in the first row. Professor, my name is actually... I don't care, Vaster cut her short. I expect at least half of you to drop out within the first 6 months. I won't bother remembering your names. Most faces turned red with anger, while it was inwardly smiling. If compared to most nobles he had encountered in the past, Professor Vaster was really polite. At least he didn't discriminate. He treated everyone like crap. Suprememagus, Chapter 62, A New Lesson, Part 2. The black-haired girl was simply outraged. She belonged to one of the ancient noble families, admired and respected in all the Griffon kingdom. She had always been treated like a princess of royal blood. No one had ever dared disrespect her. Now, not only she had to endure all those harsh words, but also had no way to bite back Professor Vaster. Threatening a mage belonging to an academy was like spitting towards the sky. It would always backfire. All he had to do was give her a bad evaluation to put an end to her career as a healer. Having 5 siblings and being at the bottom of the line succession, magic was her only redeeming feature. She could only swallow her pride and answer. The lower tiers of light magic have 2 insurmountable limits. The first being that the light magic can only enhance the recovery of the patient. If he or she suffered from an excessive blood loss or is already on the verge of death, healing magic is useless. The second limit, Okay, enough. Your turn, edgy face. He cut short, pointing his finger at Lid. The second limit is that it cannot regrow lost body parts, be it organs or limbs. Clean-cut fingers or extremities can be reattached, but only if well preserved and within an hour from the amputation. Correct and correct. Vastor almost sounded disappointed. Now, who can tell me how, hypothetically, the first issue could be solved? Everyone raised his hands once again. You, with the pauper face, he said to a petite girl with long brown hair sitting a few desks away from Lid. Because of her small and scrawny build, it was hard to imagine her 12 years old. She looked barely a day past 8. Clearly, she had suffered from malnutrition for a long time. Lid's sixth sense told him that the academy uniform was probably the first pretty clothes she had ever had. With all the stress from her first day of the academy, the treats and the insults from Professor Vester had been the last straw for her. When she tried to answer, only hiccups come out. She was fighting back her tears. What a callous man, Lee thought. His hand instinctively played with the ballot, but he didn't activate it. It was her problem, not his. She had done nothing for him when he had been bullied twice that morning. That made him eager to return the favor. His movements, though, didn't escape Professor Vaster's eyes. I had almost forgot about the bum with the ballot. If that thing is recording and he bothers reporting me to the headmasters, I will be in trouble. Linjos had been crystal clear that Professor Tough Love is considered bullying and has tried more than once to fire me. He's just waiting for an excuse to replace me with one of his angry lackeys. Damn it, I'm too old to lose such a good job. I'm so sorry, young miss. I didn't mean to offend you. There. Take your time before answering. His voice was suddenly all milk and honey, offering her a handkerchief from his chest pocket. Despite her frail looks, she needed but a second to compose herself. The only way to do it, she replied, sniffling from time to time, would be to somehow infuse the patient with an external source of life force, but that's impossible. I worked as a healer since I was 6 years old. I've tried countless spells and always failed. Light magic cannot create or pass energy, only nourish what is already there. The whole class nodded. Heck if I know, Lee thought. The only patients I have ever failed were those that arrived too late for being saved. Not even my true magic could transfuse life force. Correct, young miss. This time he sounded genuinely happy. The class was starting to think he suffered from severe mood swings. And don't worry, here at the light department we will fix your growth problem in a snap. You have my word. After making sure to be outside hot waters, he resumed his snarky tone. The little one is right. Light magic cannot do it. No matter how talented the mage or how complex the spell, it's impossible. Yet Tier 4 light magic can. Anyone wants to take an educated guess? The classroom felt silent. No hand was raised. Professor Vester sneered at their ignorance, puffing his chest. Oh, seems you still have much to learn, but you have come to the right place. The answer is, it's only possible by mixing it with dark magic. What? How the Professor Vaster ignored their shocked expressions and the exclamation filling the air, while waving his hands in the air, generated with the first magic a black and white circle identical to Earth's representation of yin and yang. The greatest legacy left us from Magus Silverwing is the knowledge that light and dark magics are one. They perpetually dance together in all things. When one pushes, the other pulls. When light steps forward, darkness steps backwards, and vice versa. When they are in harmony, life thrives. Otherwise, only death awaits. The key to Tier 4 light magic is weaving them together. Dark magic takes the energy from the donor, while light magic allows it to enter the patient's body without backlashes. Balancing them is the key to success. How can I be so stupid? I read that goddamn book hundreds of times. I should have understood this years ago by myself. I wish I was more talented in magic, or at least smarter. Hey, that's offensive, Solus rebuked. I'm way smarter than you, and I have failed nonetheless. The real problem is that our approach to magic is too naive. By my maker, I hate feeling so useless. If only I still had my memories. Excuse me, Professor, I have a question. Snobface awoke them from their self-pity moment. If here at White Griffon we mix light and dark magic together for healing, what's the difference between us and the Black Griffon? Can they do the same? The difference, dear Snobface, lies in the purpose. Here at White Griffon, we are proud of our light magic department, where we can cure almost everything. At the Black Griffon, they specialize in destroying things. The rest of the hour, Professor Vaster showed them again and again the simplest Tier 4 light magic spell until everyone was capable of performing it. The fastest students turned out to be young Miss, an arrogant-faced kid, Snobface, and Edgy Face in this order. Lit had done his best. He needed to experience spell with fake magic before being able to reproduce and enhance it with true magic. Yet he ended up in 4th place. After that, Professor Vaster opened warp steps that brought them right outside the Academy's hospital. Lit, by keeping open the portal for so long, the professor gave me time I needed to clear its mystery. The reason why the staff can open them with such ease is because of the ring with the Academy insignia they wear. The whole castle is a giant artifact. They simply use the rings to tap into its powers. If your uniform has so many functions, I can even imagine what something as big and powerful as this building can do. Lit didn't reply. He just wondered how powerful Solus could be compared to the Academy if she regained her old power. He had only found mentions of magic towers in fairy tales, and they were described as something unfathomable. According to the lore, with his own magic tower, a mage was nigh omnipotent. But fairy tales also told about fairy godmothers, elves, prides, and happy endings, and he had yet to meet someone that took any of those things seriously. When he had spoken about them with Nana, Lark, and the Marchioness, they had all mocked him for his childish dreams. When the students entered through the double doors, they found hard to believe to their eyes. The Academy Hospital ward would put any Earth's hospital to shame. The floors were able to self-clean. The beds would move and massage the patients' bodies to avoid bed sores, constantly keeping in check their vitals. The air was fresh and clean, free of the smell of disinfectants that usually plague those places. Everything looked more like out of a celebrity resort rather than a place where people went to die. "What a marvel of magic," said the arrogant-faced boy from before, a 15-year-old, 1 meter and 65 centimeters high with red hair. "But I suppose it was to be expected since you were the one designing the whole thing, Professor Vaster." "Uriel, my boy," Professor Vaster finally recognized him. "Long time no see. How is your old man, dearest? Being an archmage is a big burden. You must be ready to step in and help him as soon as possible." "My dad is doing fine, thank you. I'll send him your regards. With your help, I'm sure I'll be able to keep up the family tradition. But of course, mage bloodlines are highly treasured here at the Light Department. I hope you will show all those naughty nobles and poor commoners what the true magician is made of." "I stand corrected," Lid thought. "He does discriminate, just not the way I'm used to. He seems to be a sucker to magical families instead of noble ones. I guess not every professor can be like Trask or Nalier." Just thinking her name sent a warm feeling through his body. That Lid hastily suppressed. He despised himself for his weak hormonal body, wasting his precious time and energies on teenagers' delusions. Lid could not afford any slip-ups. The trial round was about to begin, and he was determined to shine among his peers. Suprememagus, Chapter 63. The Importance of Status. Professor Vaster was true to his word. He brought them to the hospital intensive care unit and asked them in turns to diagnose the nature of the patient's condition. Vaster would take notes about their answers to confront them with the charts. He wasn't allowed to give them scores on their first day, but he didn't hesitate to harshly reprimand those who missed any detail, humiliating them in front of the class. Because of the nature of the task, the class was split into groups. Right after each one of them had examined their first patients, the following rounds allowed Vaster to further split the groups based on the student's degree of expertise. In the first group belonged those who had chosen the Master Healer specialization, lured by the prestige the title implied. Yet they lacked either way experience in the healer practice or the resources to have a proper tutor to make up for it. Vaster was immediately able to spot them, since they were only able to use Venire Ratu, the ubiquitous Tier 1 diagnostic spell. In the second group, instead, there were Snobface, Edgy Face, Young Miss, Uriel, and all those who had at their disposal a diagnostic personal spell or even more than one. Much to his surprise, the Archmage's son, Uriel, was equaled in talent and precision by the Snobface girl, while the Young Miss and the Edgy Face kid ran circle around even them, standing out like hawks among crows. Especially Edgy Face had proven to be capable of finding minor details that even the Academy's master healer had missed in their diagnosis. It was nothing big, but he was also able to suggest ways to improve their prognosis, hastening the healing process. Master hadn't arrived at his age and social standing by letting something insignificant like his personal prejudice or preference stand in the way of his best interests. Commoners or not, those two smell of success. Even that snotty-faced brat is damn good if she is able to hold her ground against a pure blood like Uriel. I have always been proud of my knack for recognizing true talent. I don't care if the spotlight I'm under is mine or someone else, as long as I get to maintain my status and position, anything goes. I have to get their good graces before anyone else. After they get famous, I would be a nobody. Right now, I'm all their world. Time to jot down some names and remember them properly. I'd say we have some winners. While talking to the top 4 students, Voice had lost any trace of sarcasm and disrespect. He spoke with a soft and amiable tone, like a grandfather talking to his beloved grandkids. Would you mind to introduce yourself properly to the class? It would motivate them to work hard enough to compete with you all, if they are delusional enough to believe they even have a sliver of hope. Of course, he inwardly sneered. In his mind, Vaster had already separated the cream from the milk from the piss. He was merely being polite. My name is Freya Solivar. Like everyone else, she was wearing pants, not a skirt, so while doing the courtesy, she held up her robe instead. My mother is Duchess Solivar. I hope you have heard about her. Vaster's eyebrow rose while he was racking his brain trying to remember. Ah, yes, I heard only praises about how she managed to stop that terrible flood last year. Such an ingenious woman was bound to have a gifted daughter. I'm sure you have a bright future ahead of you. He skipped Uriel. He doubted that even those boneheads could have missed his flaunting status of Archmage Darius' heir. After making a few gestures to one of his attendants, Vaster stood in front of the petite girl, smiling kindly. My name is Quilla from Serea. I'm 12 years old. Quilla didn't know etiquette or how to introduce herself, so she just made a deep bow while sharing what she deemed to be relevant. So young, yet so skilled. You are truly a diamond in the rough. Vaster received from his attendant a bottle containing a purple liquid that he gifted to Quilla with a small bow. Here, this is one of the best tonics our master alchemist can prepare. Drink a glass of it every night before going to bed, and you'll grow up like a mushroom. I'm sure you'll become a beautiful lady. Quilla took his bait, line and sinker, blushing up from her ears for the compliments. She had never received anything so precious in her life, so she held the bottle like a baby, stuttering her thanks. Contrary to his expectation, Edgy Face had taken out his notebook, literally jotting down what the others had said. He made the brilliant move of using water magic to write instead of a pen. Perfect silent water magic. My God never fails me. Vaster smiled widened. He was sure to have struck a gold mine. Showing respect to your competitors is always a smart move, young man. Following the etiquette books he has stored in Soluspedia, Lit took a step back in sign of respect towards Professor Vaster before performing a deep bow. I always write down everything that's significant to make it easier to remember. The three of them are the only ones worthy of attention, after all. After the poor figure he did during Professor Nallar's class, Lit was brimming with confidence. Thanks to invigoration, he was certain to have performed better than anyone else. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel any more like a frog in a well. He had finally found something he has actually was the best at. After how his classmates had treated him, Lee didn't care to keep up appearances. He was already a pariah, someone they threw trash at without a care. He had nothing to lose anymore. Lit would treat them just like they did to him, with spite and showing no mercy. My name is Lit from Lutia. I'm 12 years old too. 12 years? Lit? Lit was already taller than him, so Vaster had failed to recognize him. I've heard so much around you. Heck, everyone here has. Guys, he was allegedly talking to the whole class, but he looked only at other three to make sure they paid attention. Lit, here, is the one that cracked the so-called curse, a unique poison that had eluded even the best of us. Have you heard about it? Freya and Uriel nodded, while Kula and many others shook their heads. Vaster's heart bled at the idea of wasting so much paper, but he couldn't make a single copy of the report just for Quilla. The other students would have complained about such blatant discrimination. While his attendant was handing the reports, he kept tending at his gold mine. A 12-year-old hexcaster with great talent in light magic to boot. That's how he got his admission. Between his build, height, and everything they had learned in the last minute, Lit's classmates were looking at him with new eyes, even a hint of respect. Freya and Uriel regretted what they had done earlier. If instead of throwing trash at him, they had managed to get on his good books, maybe he could have taught them so much. For a second, Freya thought that she was the only one to have another chance. After what happened earlier, Lit was clearly sensitive to feminine charms, and she was quite pretty. But when she smiled at him, opening her mouth to start chatting, he sent her a cold glare that sent shivers down her spine. His eyes were empty, like those of a predator that's about to rip its prey apart. Arya swallowed back her hopes and pretended that nothing had happened. Lit, my boy, you should smile more. If you keep glaring at everyone, how could they notice how handsome you are? Vaster patted his shoulder. Me? Handsome? What a bootlicker. How can he even think I didn't notice his 180 degrees turn of attitude? Lit thought. I think he knows you did. He just hopes you don't care, Solus replied. As for the handsome, yeah, you are not at Trask level, but maybe if you drop the teenage serial killer look. Quilla too was regretting what had happened earlier, but for the entirely different reasons. She didn't do anything against Lit, but she hadn't helped him either. Like the others, she had always kept her distance. In hindsight, she maybe would have helped another commoner on her own age, but he was tall and scary, so she mistook him for a noble, not to mention that her class scared her even more. Well, enough with the rounds. I already got what I need. Let me show you all where the real magic happens." Vaster walked them through a few corridors and into another world. The plaque above the door was self-explanatory: missing limbs. As you should have realized, this is where we move the patients that have lost one or more limbs. After stabilizing their condition, we can actually regrow them from scratch, but it's a long and difficult spell. Follow me. The ward was almost empty. Only a couple of beds were occupied. Unlike the ICU, it was filled with flowers and magic paintings, making the atmosphere soothing and relaxing. The walls were magic frescoes depicting sunny woods, so vivid to see through. Professor Vaster brought them around the bed of a 20-something-years-old blonde guy that was missing his right arm. Only a small stump remained. "Students, allow me to introduce you Captain Zaran. He lost his arm in a skirmish against the Gorgon Empire while defending the northern borders of your kingdom." The man was clearly embarrassed. Unlike most of the ICU patients, he was awake and clear-headed. Despite they were politely greeting him, he couldn't help but feel like a horse at the market, ready to be probed and examined mercilessly. Suddenly, the ward's double doors opened again. The man that walked in drew the attention of all the staff and almost all students. From their gasp of admiration, Lid could deduce that he was either Professor Mart or Manoir. "Bright blue manacore," Solus pointed out. "My money on him being Mart." "Not accepting the bet," Lid replied. "Professor Mart, so nice to see you," Vastor said with a smile from year to year. "I was just about to explain the fourth-year students the regrowth procedure. Do you want to do the honors?" Suprememagus, Chapter 64, The Importance of Status, Part 2. Professor Mart was a man around 40 years old, about 1 meter and 78 centimeters high, with thick blonde hair. Aside from his goatee, his face was perfectly shaven, revealing a calm and youthful appearance. Judging from the bangs under his eyes and the slouching posture, it was evident that he lacked sleep. It was no wonder that he had asked Professor Vaster to stand in for him. When he saw the students, he straightened up, smiling at the small crowd. "Gladly, dear colleague. Sorry to have missed our appointment, kids. Since Professor Manoir returned, things have been hectic. There's a lot he needs to catch up with." The class made a small bow, accepting his apologies, eager to learn from one of the two most famous heads of the White Griffon Light department. First of all, the impossibility to regrow limbs or organs is a common misconception. The human body actually has such capabilities, but they are normally dormant. To temporarily awake them is necessary a huge amount of energy. We are talking about so much mana that is impossible for a single mage to perform the spell alone. Usually, the procedure requires two teams. The first one to perform the spell, setting the regeneration process in motion. The second one, instead, has to give energy to the patients for them to survive. Otherwise, the strain from growing a limb in a matter of minutes would drain the body of all the nutrients, killing on the spot. Most organs are even trickier, since time is of the utmost importance. A single mage can generate small ones like kidneys, but bigger or vital organs usually require too much energy. It's best for a lone mage to keep the vitals stable while calling for help. Interesting, Lee thought. Based on the little I know, maybe the large mana expenditure is due to the fact that what they actually do without knowing it is collecting and stimulating adult stem cells in the patient body. That or this world they have a healing factor. But I highly doubt it. If I'm right, with true magic I could do all by myself. But it would take days if not weeks. The on-off nature of fake magic makes things too hard for both the healer and the patient. True magic instead allows to divide things by steps, like I did for Tista. Professor Mart continued, "You are in for a treat. Since I was just about to start growing Captain Zaran new right arm." The soldier smiled awkwardly. He wasn't feeling like a market horse anymore, more like a lab rat. The first step is to take in consideration the sex and the build of the patient. Then choose the best limb template at our disposal. Template? Lead echoed dumbstruck, drowning on himself reproachful looks from his peers. Yes, template. We can't allow the new limb to grow endlessly. The spell needs specific measurements to work properly. An assistant brought to Mart a cart full of wooden arms that the professor compared to the remaining limb, searching for the most similar one. Each of these models corresponds to a different spell. Here at the White Griffon, we have the biggest archive of regenerating spell of all the kingdom. I like to think that in part is thanks to my work. After choosing the best fit, Professor Mart called the rest of them the team via communicator amulet, forming two teams of 3 mage each. Technically, 2 mages per group should be enough, he explained. The third one is to be sure that everything goes fine. This is no war zone. There is no need of taking unnecessary risks. Both the spells took only a few seconds to cast. The new arm started to grow back at an amazing rate. After about half an hour, the new limb was completely formed. The class exploded into applause. All the medical staff accepted it with a small bow. Captain Zaran was crying out of joy, flexing his new fingers. He still couldn't believe it. In his eyes, it was a miracle. He was a cripple no more. Soon, he would be able to resume activity instead of being locked behind the desk. The only discontent note in all that joyous atmosphere was Lid. He was closely looking to both arms, noticing the difference. The real one was much more muscular, with a higher bone density. Plus, the new one was even a little shorter. He offered Zaran both his index fingers. "Squeeze them as hard as you can." After that test, he shook his head. "Professor Mart, is it normal for a new arm to be so out of proportion and weak?" He could see most of his classmates glaring or signaling him to shut up. Morons, he inwardly sneered. In any scientific field, researchers are always looking for curious people that make questions and challenge the standard knowledge. They have no need for trained monkeys that just follow orders. Without doubts, there is no progress, only stagnation. Kids are so naive. Yes, it is. It will take a couple of years of training and therapy. But after that, it should be as good as the old one. Good catch. It's rare seeing someone so young showing such attention to the details, instead of pestering me to teach him some spell. The praises made his class feel stupid as sheeps. Professor Vaster was giggling. I knew it. Poor Gold. Thank the gods for my neck. Why? Is there something wrong? What would you do differently? Mart asked. Lid pondered for a while before replying. He could not believe that such opportunity would have presented itself right off the bat. All those years spent preparing to teach Tista healing magic were about to get him an unexpected payoff. Professor, I do not mean to be rude, but how much do you know about anatomy? Professor Mart tilted his head by the side, surprised by the apparent silly question. I know everything I need, the shape and position of the bones, and where are the various organs, and so on. I'm a healer, not a doctor. I only need to know the necessary for magic to perform at its best. Realizing how shallow was their knowledge, Lid understood that the use of magic must have slowed down, if not completely stopped, the scientific progress in the kingdom. He wasn't disappointed, quite the contrary. It just made what he had to offer even more precious. Lid ripped off a blank page from his notebook and then used water magic to write down in detail one of his fake magic personal spells that he had created for Tista years ago. An image is worth 1,000 words, he said, handing the page to Professor Mart. Are you really willing to share your diagnostic spell with the Academy and the Kingdom? Professor Mart was dumbstruck, while Professor Vaster was pale as a ghost. He can't be that dumb. Why the heck is he giving up such an advantage against his competitors? Can my knack have finally failed me? He thought. It's not a diagnostic spell, Lid explained. It's something I created long ago to get a better understanding of the human body. I don't even use it anymore, but I think it could be critical to your research in this field. Both the professors sighed in relief. They both had seen too many talented youths so eager to please to make irreparable mistakes. Full of curiosity, Professor Mart studied the spell. It was really easy, without a doubt, a Tier 1 spell. Done. Now, please use it on Captain's original arm. After performing the hand sign perfectly, Professor Mart said, Venire Marcurt, generating a small whips of light that on contact suddenly enveloped the arm in a warm white light. His mind received streams of information that left him speechless. The spell was intentionally weaker, flawed, and inaccurate version of what Lid was able to see thanks to invigoration. The difference between the two were like heaven and earth. The spell was incapable of showing injuries to detect the mana flow or core or even the life force, to prevent Tista to accidentally stumble on true magic. Lid had made sure that everything was as he had planned. It had no hint about any of those elements. The only way to add them to the spell was rebuilding it from the scratch and knowing already what to look for. Its purpose was to teach Lid's sister anatomy in detail without dismembering humans like he did. As it was, Venire Marcourt did nothing more than show a fixed 3D imaging of the body part it was used on, giving the user a perfect understanding of the patient's body. This is... Professor Mart was flabbergasted, considering all the possible application of the spell. You see, if I were in your shoes using this spell, hold that thought. Mart cut him short, running away with the page clenched in his fist. He turned after really a minute. dragging another man from the arm like a petulant child. "No means no," the dragman screamed. "You cannot disturb me every time some stupid noble is about to die, be it the king or his children. I don't care if I spend another hour with all that paperwork, it will drive me crazy. For the last time, no one is dying. Shut up and listen." Everyone was pointing to the new guy like he was some mythical beast. "Purple, my money on him being Manacore," Solus yelled. "Why do you keep trying to con me? What use do you have for money?" While Lit and Solus were having a mind quarrel, Mart explained everything to Manacore, handing him the spell. After he performed it too, both professors looked at Lit with eyes full of expectation. Manacore was a man in his late 20s, with black hair and shades of silver. He was around 1 meter and 74 centimeters tall, with a slender build and stumble at least 3 days old. "Please continue," said Mark. "As I was saying, I would use this spell before sending the most valuable soldiers to the front to be able to recreate their original limbs if necessary arise. That would avoid all the side effects of the spell that you just showed me. Also, in cases like this one, I would take the information from the remaining arm to use it to generate a mirror image to replace the lost limb. The left and right limbs are not the same, but the result would be still much better than this one." "And that is not all," Manacore chimed in. A crazy light had appeared in his eyes. "We could even devise a spell that's capable of taking that information by itself and generate the limbs accordingly. We could finally throw away all those useless templates, using only one spell instead of many." Everyone was shocked at the idea. Manacore often disappeared without notice or acted like a tantruming child, but that kind of madness was a sign of a true genius. He had been able to see farther than the spell creators in a matter of seconds. Manacore took out his communicator amulet, opening the connection with the administrative department. "What's your name, kid?" he asked. "Lit from Lutia, sir." "Ah, I should have known it. Finally, another smart mage to talk to. You have no idea how hard it is for me. Only Mart and a few others are able to have a proper conversation. Everyone around here is so stupid." "Harumph." A voice from the communicator amulet stopped his ramblings. "Oh yes, I almost forgot. Points assignation for the student Lit from Lustria from sharing a Tier 1 spell. 1,000 points. 1,000 points?" repeated the male voice from the communicator amulet in disbelief. 1,000 points, explained almost all his classmates, becoming green with envy. 1,000 points? Asked both Lit and Quilla, that being for the first time in the academy, had no idea if there were many or few. "Yes, 1,000 points. Is it so hard to understand?" Manacore was outraged by the academy having the gall to hire a clerk, dumb or deaf, if not both. "I know it's too little," he said apologetically to Lit, "but I can't give you more until I discuss it with the board. Also, you'll get compensation for each and every one of your suggestions. Good ideas are priceless in the research field. Be kind and graduate quickly. I need more people like you and less idiots like this secretary around these parts." "Sir, the communication is still open." The clerk did a great job of keeping his voice emotionless. "I know it's open, you idiot. That's why I'm telling you to get your ears fixed. I can do nothing for your brain. But never give up hope. Magic advances every day by leap and bounds. The clerk politely hung up the call. How did you create the spell? Mart was interested. The idea was simple yet groundbreaking. He can save it for his biographer. It was Manaware's turn to drag Mart away by the arm. To the paperwork, for the life of me, and then to the board. You do the talking. I don't speak stupid. The gong resounded once more, making the end of the lessons. After saying his goodbye to Professor Vaster and to his 3 competitors, Leet walked away towards the prize hall. Based on his understanding, it was time for a little shopping spree. Suprememagus, Chapter 65. Judging a book by its cover. In the White Griffon, like in all the 6 big academies, students from different years had no common spaces. To avoid the older and stronger seniors to haze their juniors. This feat had been achieved simply by having each academic year take place on a single floor. On the ground floor of the castle, there was the welcome area for the visitor and secretariat, where clerks would take care of the academy's paperwork. The first floor accommodated the first year of the academy, the second floor the second one, and so on. Above the 5th floor, there were the staff living quarters and their personal labs, but most of the space was noted on the map as either empty or assigned to a nondescriptly named departments. Leet suspected that all the academy's private business, like the hidden specializations, training courses, took place there. In that moment, though, while looking at the castle map with Soluspedia, Leet wasn't wondering about the academy's mysteries, rather he was cursing its faulty design. Damage. It's no wonder that the professor always moved around with warp step. I didn't realize it at first, but even a single floor is like a small city, much bigger than the whole Lutia village. The prize hall is quite far from the hospital. It will take me at least 10 minutes to reach it, and much more to return to my apartments. I hadn't planned on doing this much cardio. I'm tired. The only things I want to do are sleeping and eating. The only silver lining in this situation is that everyone is suffering the same fate. After the gong, Professor Vaster left on his own, leaving us stranded in the world. With all that happened during the first day, the psychological burden on its mind was enormous. Facing bullies, holding himself to use true magic, being forced to tolerate so many idiots without kicking their asses was something he was no longer used to. Since his birth, he had always kept the human interactions to a minimum. Now, he was constantly on alert. He couldn't lower his guard for a second. The ballot always at hand. He couldn't wait to lock the door behind him and finally have some peace and quiet. I don't know if we'll ever be allowed to use warp steps in here, Solus pondered. But why exactly aren't we floating, flying, or something? There is no rule against the use of magic within the academy, except if it's used to harm or harass others. Leet froze on the spot, face palming because of his own stupidity. Either I'm too tired to think clearly, or you are definitely smarter than I look. I love you, Solus, Leet thought. I love you more, she replied. Leet pretended to cast a personal flight spell and then zoomed away, sticking with his back on the ceiling. 10 minutes trip became 1 minute flight at low speed. Leet couldn't risk crashing against someone else. During that time, Lid contemplated how having a symbiotic relationship had changed his life. He was not thinking about Solus having a 360-degree sight, her pocket dimension, or any of her capabilities. What never ceased to amaze him was how he had come of being used to think of himself as we, rather than I, in his own thoughts. Despite the terror that she had struck in his heart after their first meeting, Solus was now closer to him than his sisters. They shared even his dreams while he was asleep. When he arrived, the prize haul was a complete disappointment. Lid had imagined it like a library, but filled with magical treasures, with the shelves occupied by items and their descriptions. He had thought about browsing through them, asking the clerk's help from time to time, but reality begged to differ. Squeezed between the battle mage and the war mage training halls stood something that closely resembled an ATM. On the flashing display, there was the blinking image of an open palm, so Lid followed the foolproof instruction, sending mana into it. The display turned bright, making a 3D hologram of a clerk to appear. It was a chubby woman in her 30s with a tired face that put Lid to shame. Her eyes focused on his face. Lid could see her fiddling with something kind of a crystal. "You are Lid of Lutia, right?" The crystal in her hands was projecting a detailed image of his facial features. Lid nodded. "Is anyone there with you? Is someone forcing you to spend your points?" No, Lid was cynical and paranoid, yet he was surprised by how bad things in the academies had to be to enforce such protocol. The woman pressed another crystal and a bubble of light enveloped Lid. "You are in a safe zone. No one can see or hear us now. Do you need help? I can send you a guard in a second with warp step." "Are you sure everything is fine?" "Yes, I am fine. Thanks for your kindness." 1,000 points on your first day? The woman sounded sincerely amazed. "Kid, you have hit the mother lode. Feel free to check our inventory." On the screen appeared something similar to a web page that he could navigate through by using his mana. The dimensional items prices range from the 100 to over 300 points. Magic story rings costed 100 points per tier. There were also weapons available, but Lid had never held a real one. His training back on Earth made use only of wooden swords, knives, and spears. The balance was completely different, and without a proper training, they would be useless against a skilled opponent. Potions were the cheapest objects, costing 10 points each. The most expensive item was the uniform, costing 5,000 points. That would allow Lid to keep it even after concluding his studies and have its looks change to something less flashy. Sadly, there was no wrist or pocket watch available. He bought the cheapest dimensional amulet, 80 points. One magic story ring for each of the first 3 tiers, 600 points. A physical enhancement potion of each type, 30 points. Lid now had all he needed to master the use of true magic and Solus. The clerk sent him the items via warp steps, one at a time, asking him to imprint them in front of her for security reasons. Even the potions were no exceptions. On his way back, he stopped at the canteen. It was too early for dinner, but he was in dire need for comfort food. so he stirred a hot chocolate cup and some pastry before going back to his room. The books had yet to be delivered, so he could finally relax and contemplate approaching his table. Lid stopped them before they could sit down. "Sorry, but we have a saying in my village. The best way to enjoy a blinker requires only two guests, me and the blinker. We didn't want to share it. We just wanted to sit here with you," Uriel said. "Really?" Lid knitted his eyebrows. "Aren't you afraid of the consequences of associating yourself with a pariah?" Uriel laughed at the idea, drawing all the eyes in the canteen. The only thing the others knew was that the four of them belonged to the same specialization. Expecting a fight to break out, the room felt silent. What's there to be afraid of? My father is an archmage. He can wipe out most of these guys with a finger snap. Besides, powerful mages should stick together. Yeah? What about the glass flask you threw at me this morning? Or the dirty handkerchief she hit me on the head with?" Lid said, while pointing at Freya, who became red from the embarrassment. "How do you know? I was right behind you." "I am that good. I admit it. We started with the wrong foot, but there's no reason we cannot be friends," Uriel said with a confident and charismatic attitude. "Friends?" Liz stood up. The audience even stopped chewing, trying to eavesdrop on their conversation. "That's the son of an archmage. Guess he doesn't fear the coward's end. I hope they kill each other." These were some of the comments that Lid and Solus managed to perceive. "If you were in my shoes, would you really be friends with someone that first mistreated you, only to act all friends when he has discovered your talent?" My educated guess is no. You all should have been smarter and not have judged a book just by its cover. Lucky for me, you revealed your true nature, so I won't buy your nice act. I admit it, I was wrong and I apologize for that. Uriel was unrelenting. Lid had to give him that much. You may not like us, but try to be more pragmatic. If they see you with us, your life will be much easier. Point taken, Lid replied, but right now, I don't feel like making friends, maybe another time. He extended his hand to Uriel, who promptly shook it. Thanks for not treating me with your dad's power, much appreciated. Would have worked? Uriel asked with a smile. No, I would have called your bluff. Neither you or any archmage strikes me as someone so petty and short-sighted, of making an enemy out of the entire academy for something so trivial. Uriel accepted the compliment and walked away, close followed by Freya. Quilla remained herself behind, staring at Lid with her big puppy eyes. Sorry for not helping you this morning, but I was too scared to move, she said in a low tone. They aren't bad guys. I think they deserve a second chance. They have been really nice to me. Lid snored, closing his face to hers in a threatening manner, but his voice was actually calm and caring. Listen well, short stuff. Never trust people just because of a few cheap words or presents. To them, our talent is just a tool. They do not consider us equals. People will always be nice and friendly until you serve your purpose. But at first mistake, they will drop you like garbage. Stick to those two, but don't let them use you. And now go before someone thinks we are friends. Either you take a ballot too, or stay the heck away from me. Go. Lid yelled the last words for the others to hear. In his eyes, Quilla was destined to end up like Nana, unless she managed to wise up and shed away her childish naivety. Finally alone, Lid sat down and started to wolf down his dinner. "You'll see, you bastards, if only a matter of time, before this young snake from Lutia becomes a dragon and swallows you whole." Suprememagus, Chapter 66, Error of Judgment. The next day, after breakfast, Lid could notice that people were looking at him with astonished eyes. He had no idea if it depended by his new set of rings and amulet in plain sight over the shirt. After all, only the user knew its quality. They looked all alike. Another possibility was that the news from the Master Healer class had started to spread. Either way, he didn't care. Lid just waved his hands to those who stared at him for too long, giving them the finger and forcing them to turn around. The first lesson would be with Professor Trask, again, this time in Theory of Combat Magic's training hall. While everyone else was on foot, checking the map from time to time, Lid flew straight to the destination, arriving several minutes earlier. He spent that time with Solus, reviewing all the contingency plans they had prepared against Professor Naliar's dumbing effect. Thanks to Soluspedia, he had no need to read and memorize what was required for any lesson. But he still needed to participate the accents and hand signs. Knowing was not doing. Still, Soluspedia had given him a lot of spare time compared to his peers, and he had used that time to prepare for the worst. Lid had no idea if his new body was so much worse than his old one against hormones, or if his problem was psychological. Maybe he was so disaccustomed to strong positive feelings that the unexpected first crush had been able to caught him off guard. All the good things that happened in his life, he had obtained them through effort and hard work. He wasn't used for things to go well just because of luck. Lid needed years of constant care and affection before accepting that his new family was composed by good people. And now, out of the blue, he had such strong feelings for a complete stranger that just thinking about her would make him feel all warm and fuzzy inside. If just the idea of looking into those eyes, bright green as a luscious forest during spring under the noonday sun, makes me weak in the knees and dries my mouth, I'm scared to death by what the real thing could do. Lid thought. Yeah, agreed. Solus sneered. It's only getting worse. You are only a few bad rhymes away to write her a poem. Yes, Lid inwardly sighed. The good thing is that unless I think about her, I'm able to be my usual self. I must avoid turning into a rambling fool if she comes near me. Solus, I'm depending on you in this case. Do your worst. The training hall was even bigger than the canteen. The space inside was completely empty except for circular rings with a diameter of 10 meters, evenly spaced among them and spread throughout the whole room. Lid's train of thought was interrupted only when he saw Professor Trask arrive, followed by Headmaster Linjos. After all the students had arrived, Linjos made them sit down on the ground. He had something to tell. If any of you is asking himself why Lady Hestia, Lady Wark, and Lady Karn haven't attended any of yesterday's lessons, the answer is they were busy packing their stuff. As a matter of fact, they have been dishonorably expelled from this academy. The terrible events that transpired yesterday had been added to their personal files. They can apply to other academies, yet I doubt anyone will give them even a probation admittance. I'm not telling you this because I want to threaten you. I just want you to realize that your actions have consequences. Life isn't a game. There is no do-over. More importantly, I want you to reflect about the society you want to live in. Does any of you know that despite at the beginning of each year, 6 out of 10 students belong to the great noble families? 7 out of 10 of those that actually manage to graduate are just commoners, merchants, and small nobles? And why is that? Because while the nobles waste their time harassing others, thinking that their family name will always solve every problem, the others work hard, knowing how important magic is. They don't have the luxury of a second chance. If a noble fails, he just returns to his beautiful manor. His whole life is still planned ahead for him. Those who succeed instead have too much to lose, and their motivation keeps them focused. Most of the time, a huge part of that motivation is revenge. Do you realize how many mages have destroyed an entire noble household because of a past grudge? Do you really want to live in a world where commoners tremble in fear of the nobles, while the nobles, in turn, fear the mages? It's because of this flawed morality that our kingdom is slowly devolving into chaos. The academy rules don't just protect the commoners from you, they also protect you from the mages of tomorrow. Might makes right is all fun and games until you find someone stronger than you. Then it becomes a nightmare where you can lose everything on a whim of your better. Law is a shield to defend the weak, not a sword to threaten others' lives. I hope that you all take my words to heart. Thank you for your time. As soon as the headmaster left the room, the air filled with comments about the news. It had been years since the last time someone managed to get expelled, and it only happened because a professor witnessed the events. It was easy to predict where the discussion was headed, so Lee took out the ballot and stood up near Professor Trask. He had joined the academy a little more than 24 hours ago, and all that mean looks routine had already bored him to death. Trask didn't miss any of it. Still blaming the victim, huh? Our headmaster is really a good guy. He really believes in you a lot. As for me, I believe that humans are too arrogant and self-centered to have any concept of pain outside their own. People are only able to empathize with things they experience hard enough to get themselves hurt. That's why I took this job. The contrast between Professor Trask's handsome face and the cruel smile he made managed to make it even creepier. Between his veiled threats and the grins, the professor really seems full-blown psycho. I doubt he'll receive many love letters from the female students. Harumph, Solu objected, the pot calling the kettle black. That's the same face you do almost every minute of your day. Do I really have such an unsettling expression? Lid was flabbergasted. Yes, you do. Now let me explain today's lesson, Professor Trask continued. These rings are special. Once activated, they become a closed cage. Nothing can get in or out. I can also modify their internal structure as I see fit. With a few flicks of his fingers, the pavement rose in a different section of the nearest ring, forming first a small corridor, then a stairway, and lastly an L-shaped path. You will enter this ring in pairs. I'll prepare for you different scenarios, and in each one there will be an assailant and a victim. The assailant can either use first magic or a knife like this. Truss showed them a blunt piece of metal that could barely pass for a wedge. The victim can use first magic for self-defense. The scenario ends as soon as either one gets a direct hit. Seeing a little too much enthusiasm in some of the students, he decided to make things clearer. I know what you are thinking, but it's not as it looks like. This room is for training, not fighting. It means that even winning every scenario, no matter as a victim or assailant, won't necessarily give you any point. You're here to learn how to handle difficult situations. What it really matters is not the result, but what you learn from the experience. There's a lot of you, so we'll use 2 rings simultaneously. Don't worry, it won't take long. This is a real-life simulation, not a bard's tale. Each try will last around 5 seconds, 10 if you really take things slowly. We have plenty of time. To follow the headmaster's wishes, I divided you in pairs composed by a commoner and a noble. Let's do a few warm-up rounds to give you an idea. Mr. Most Wanted here has just volunteered. Who else? Seeing no raised hand, he picked a random student. Solus, since I have impulse control issues, limit my output to Nana's first magic level. Copy that. In the first round, Lid was the victim, while the assailant was a 15-year-old girl with shoulder-length curly red hair. Despite she was at least 5 centimeters taller than Lid, she had no confidence in her physical skills, so she decided to use magic. When Lid saw that she was actually performing hand signs for first magic, he waved together to spell. The first made a thick layer of ice appear under her feet, while the second was a wind blow, the equivalent of a push. When she tried shifting her weight to resist the push, she slipped, falling down head first. Trask started laughing. The fight had lasted barely 2 seconds. I'm sorry, I really am, he said while helping her to get up, healing her broken nose. I completely forgot he's a perfect silent hexcaster that made a living out of hunting since he was 4, while you led a pampered life, composing poems. There was no malice on my side. Gods are my witness. No one believed a single word he was saying. Jokes aside, that was terrible on your side, he said to Lid. Let's see if the problem is you or your opponent, who is capable of at least silent triple casting. Few hands were raised. Okay, among you who received military training. Among the remaining ones, Trask picked the biggest guy he could find. It was a 15-year-old boy, at least 1 meter and 77 centimeters tall, weighing at least 80 kilograms. His muscular body resembled that of a marine. As soon as Trask let them start, Lid threw the knife at his victim, guiding and accelerating it with a silver of air magic. The student dodged it easily, but not having any real combat experience, he kept his eyes on the knife until it clashed with the translucent yellow barrier that enveloped the ring. When he looked back at Lid, he was already in front of him. Lid's right hand released a blinding light, with the same intensity of several cameras flashing together, while the left one was holding a small ice knife aimed to the victim's throat. "Okay, stop." Trask appeared between them, grabbing Lee by the wrist. Once again, the battle ended a second after its start. "Kid, I don't remember stuttering. Your performance is perfect example of what you don't have to do. Get off the ring. Minus 20 points for you. And that's because this was just a warm-up. The next time you do that, it will be much more worse." Suprememagus, Chapter 67. Impulse Control Issues. Lid came down the ring with a dumbstruck expression, trying to understand what had just happened. Maybe Professor Trask wanted to teach you respect for the opponent. By beating them like that, you abused your power, and that's exactly what the headmaster criticized earlier. Solus pondered. Trask, caring for respect? After how he treated everyone and how he laughed in that girl's face? Unlikely. Lid stood there watching the other students performing their training. As Trask predicted, every exchange was fast, but not as fast as Lid's. The performances he saw were mediocre at best. No points were assigned, but none were deducted either. He was about to ask Solus to reply to for him the exact wording Trask had used when he finally understood. In the following 2 hours, whenever it was his turn, Lid would let his opponent perform her attack before neutralizing it when he played the victim, while as the assailant, he would give them the time to react. Doing so costed him several defeats. Despite all his battle experience against savage and magical beasts, letting the opponent set his or her own read would sometimes put him at a disadvantage. That was unsurmountable in such a limited space, with only first magic. Lid spent most of the time spectating the others, often clicking his tongue at a bad move or to his own stupidity. At the end of the lesson, most of the students were mentally exhausted. The uniforms protected them from any harm first magic could do, but in such a competitive environment, even a simulated life and death situation was faced as real. Playing in both roles had made them realize how easy it was to take their lives, how big was the advantage that having a weapon granted during an ambush. Only very few of them were actually capable of using first magic properly. The others were forced to improvise on the spot, desperately trying to score at last a win. Lid was still fuming when Trask came to him. "Have you figured out your problem?" Trask asked. "Yes, this is an academy, not a battlefield. Hence, my problem is an impulse control issues. During the warm-up rounds, I took my opponents down so fast that neither of us could learn anything from the training. In a real-life situation, that would be good. But this is just an exercise where I lost control on my pride and bloodlust. I risked to lead the others by example, making them so focused on winning to not learn neither from their fights or those of the others." Trask had a pleased expression. "Not bad, kid. You avoided ranting about my allegedly unfair judgment and actually self-doubted yourself. Usually kids your age are incapable of introspection. For that, I will give you 10 points for having learned your lesson, but the total still remains minus 10 points because I want you to remember it. A mage is incapable of controlling his action. is a danger to himself and others. Lid bowed to him in sign of respect before leaving for the next class. 10 points were worth the professor's respect, yet he realized that his reactions were out of proportions. He was used to always be calm and collected, while now he was acting like a caged tiger trying to forcefully escape. This is so unnatural for me. Why didn't I pretend to accept Uriel's peace offering yesterday? I had all to gain and nothing to lose. And today, I wasn't able to grasp the meaning of the exercise until it was too late. Could this be another effect of the hormones? Or is it my body somehow rejecting my mind? The thought was quite frightening. So Lid used invigoration while walking, checking every nook and cranny of his being, searching for a clue. At first look, everything was fine. Everything was as he remembered from a year ago. But then he noticed that the impurities in his body had moved a little towards his manacore. Yet that made no sense. It would only happen when he refined his internal energy, and he had long been stuck by the bottleneck. So Lid focused on his manacore and discovered the source of all his troubles. It was pulsing like a heart. At every beat it would turn to a lighter shade of cyan, while turning back at its normal color when at rest. My refining of the manacore has overlapped with its natural evolution. My core gets stronger over time, like everyone else, but I have pushed mine so far that my body can't tolerate any further strengthening. My body and core will be at war until the latter isn't allowed to expand properly. That's why my first crush hit me so hard. The imbalance is also affecting my mind. From now on, I better count up to 100 before taking any decision. The fear of ending like the wither sent chills down his spine. It was a fate far worse than death, and he could do nothing about it but hope for the growth spurt to finally arrive. He was so depressed that when he reached the principal of advanced magic training hall, he barely noticed Professor Naliar. The room was almost identical to the one they had just left, but instead of rings, strange contraptions occupied most of the space. It consisted of a small pedestal from which came out a reversed test tube 1 meter and 80 centimeters high, containing a black sphere made of metal. Every 30 centimeters there was a mark on the glass for a total of 6 marks. I hope you have studied and understood the first spell of your book, as I recommended last time, because that's what we are going to do today. Contrary to all other tier 4 spells, Lift works almost like an inferior spell. She recited the spell, Presa Reale, and the weight inside the contraption in front of her nose completely rose above the first mark. The problem is, it has no use outside practicing higher magic. What you did just see is the effect obtaining by casting it as it was tier 3. But she recited the spell once again, and this time the weight arose above the second and the third mark before falling down. You can freely add as much buckets of mana as you want. Your goal for this lesson is to manage to rise the weight to the top of the bell jar. You have 2 hours to barely pass. Doing it just once is enough. 10 times out of 10 passing with flying colors. Choose your station and start whenever you want. For those who don't remember the spell, you can study it now, but the time limit is always 2 hours, starting 5 minutes ago. Professor Nalear ignored all the swearing that followed the students taking their position. Is she crazy? This is insane. How can they demand for us to become hexcasters in 2 hours? If this is her way to get even with us for yesterday, I'll report her to the headmaster. Those were the politest remarks addressed to her. Lid chose a bell jar in line of sight with Uriel, intending to use him as a beginner standard. According to the school records he had in Soluspedia, an A-rank magician was able to complete the exercise within half an hour. A B rank in more than 1 hour. C rank and below could fail. That gave him an idea of how much time before succeeding, but not how to begin. Since Uriel managed to start from the 3rd mark, he did the same just a minute later. The exercise was incredibly boring for Lid. For a true mage, lift was an oversimplified spell that made getting the weight up to the last mark easy as a cake. Compared to achieving the same feat with spirit magic, it was 10 times easier. Lid could have done it at the first try, but that would make him too outstanding. The worst part was that the only way he had to measure time was for Solus to count the seconds. After 15 minutes, he allowed the weight to reach the 4th mark. After a little over 20, it reached the 5th, and less than 5 minutes later, it reached the top. The bell jar turned red, emitting a ding sound. Lid was so startled that made a little jump back. Seems someone finally made it. Professor Nalear came to his side. Her hair smelled like roses, making Lid's pressure spike. 20 points for getting the first spot without any help, she said in communicator amulet. But are you capable of doing it again? She asked, coming dangerously close. Solus did go straight for Protocol Omega, generating cold spots under his armpits and at the back of his neck to avoid Lid sweating bullets. Yes, of course. He tried focusing on the spell again, despite having trouble swallowing down, like he had a tennis ball stuck in his throat. The weight rose once again to the top, producing another ding. Interesting. I can see the weight has a fluid motion. 5 steps? Yes. Once you get the gist of it, it's quite easy, he said, looking at her nose instead of her eyes. Okay, champ. Since no one seems to be brave enough to ask for a hint, humor me. Try going slower. Put half a second between every step. Lid did as instructed, discovering that the spell was actually really versatile, allowing to add mana freely, without fixed intervals, as long as the amount was always the same. Bravo! Now faster, like you want to break the bell jar. Soon the situation degenerated in a series of faster, slower, and not so be gentler. Despite she was clearly referring to the handling of the weight, carrying no double entrant whatsoever, those words conjured in Lid's feverish mind images that were completely unrelated to magic. Despite doing his best to focus on the task at hand, while Solus was cooling him off as fast as she could, only Lid's paranoid nature ended up saving him from embarrassment. That morning, he had bandaged his nether region so that in the worst-case scenario, the rise of the spear hero would cause no bulge in his pants, keeping it sticking to his abdomen. Suprememagus, Chapter 68, Racking Points. Well, we just have passed half an hour from the start of the exercise. Nalier said after her communication amulet emitted a low ringing noise. Seems I have nothing more to teach you about lift. Now, do me a favor. Soon many will start to get scared or frustrated, and will call me for help non-stop. Be a dear and give hints or suggestions to your classmates stuck at least at the third mark. I'll take care of the desperate cases. Lid had nothing to do for at least another hour and a half, so he accepted, rubbing his forehead and closing his eyes to not look at her face. Great. 10 points for demonstrating complete mastery of the lift spell, and another 10 for helping me out. She made a smile so radiant that would have made Protocol Omega useless despite Solo's best efforts, but Lid had timed correctly his thank you bow, avoiding her gaze, and immediately turned back. He had so many people to look down upon that he felt like a kid in a candy shop. Uriel had made no improvement, but Lid didn't feel compelled to help him. He'd rather preferred for his help to be openly required, if not begged for. After looking around, he noticed that Quilla, too, wasn't too far away. She seemed to be swamped at the second mark, sometimes managing to reach the third. She was 1 meter 35 centimeters tall, with such a scrawny build that she could hope to weigh over 30 kilograms, only if soaking wet. She looked so frail and weak that a gust of wind would be able to carry her away any moment. It's amazing how she managed to get a bright green manacore despite being so malnourished. If the tonic she received from Vastor really works, I wonder how wonderful and powerful she will become, Lee thought. Need a hand? He asked. She was a commoner too, and up to that point, the only person that had apologized to him without a hidden agenda. Yeah, thanks. What I'm doing wrong? Nothing. It's just that you failed to grasp the spell's explanation. Quilla looked at him with a downtrodden expression, racking her brain while her neighbors at the fourth mark were sneering at her. Lid was really tempted to kick them in the nuts, but alas, too many witnesses. Right. If you remember, it mentioned that this exercise required creating 5 steps, right? Right. Quilla nodded, taking a break to give Lid her undivided attention. Every step pushes the weight above a mark, so you may think that you need to create 5 steps, or if you prefer, 5 small pulses of mana to push the weight up to the top. She nodded again. But the book never mentioned that you need to generate them all together. Lift gives you a wide window of opportunity to create the steps. Noticing that she was still not understanding, he dumbed down the concept. Imagine that you must walk a stair to get to an upper floor. You need 5 steps to do it, and it's your mana that creates them. Even if you can maintain only 2 steps at a time, it's plenty enough. You just need to get up to the second step. Let the first one dissolve, create the third. Move up to the third, rinse and repeat. Quilla completed the thought. That's why the book called them steps instead of pulses or pushes. To be honest, the choice of words had puzzled me quite a bit. Lid nodded. Otherwise, it would require to be able to cast 5 pulses at a time, and it would be completely unreasonable for the second lesson. But Quilla was listening no more. After thanking him quickly, she went back to the practice, managing instantly to always reach the third mark. In less than 10 minutes, another ding resounded. Her neighbors had long stopped sneering, and once they managed to find the courage for asking Lit for an encore, he was nowhere to be found. Quilla ignored the request for help, working hard to master what she had just understood. After her, Lit helped Uriel and then Freya. He had yet to decide what to do with them, but he had nothing to lose in the exchange. He would kill two birds with one stone, showing them his superiority while also making them feel obligated. Managing to establish a relationship on equal terms with the heir of an archmage and the daughter of an influential noble would discourage his peers to show open hostility, if not force them to avoid any further harassment. Soon, his outstanding performance in the light department would be well known. Very few would dare to move against him once Mart and Manacore had such an interest towards him. All he needed was just another push, and all the young master and mistress's drama would become a relic of the past. At the end of the lesson, Lit received 10 more points from Naliar, since many of those he helped had managed to completely understand the nature of the exercise. That makes 50 points. Solus was ecstatic. Too bad, we must also deduct the 10 Trust took away. It's no use crying over spilled milk, Lit replied. Besides, after lunch, we have our first Forge Master lesson. I can wait to get my hands on it. At lunch, Quilla, Uriel, and Freya tried to join him once again. And this time, he didn't send them away. He was curious to see what they had to offer in terms of knowledge and power. Instead, he ended up swamped in a small talk. Lit had completely forgotten what high school conversations were like. How teenagers mostly talked about boys, girls, or whined about their teachers. Seriously, Freya stabbed her lasagne like she had a personal vendetta against it. What kind of professor just puts you in a room and demands you figure out everything by yourself? How big of a jerk can she be? Lit listened on and off to her, so when the topic at the hand became his area of expertise, he was ready to answer the question he had just misheard. At least a double D cup, he thought. By my maker, don't you dare say that aloud, Solus' mind scolded him. I bet your family hired a tutor for you, Uriel chimed in, shaking his head at her remark. Yes, why? Only tutors spoon-fed magic. My father never explained anything to me, unless I was incapable of understanding something on my own. He would just give me books and demand results. Being clear-headed again, Lee joined the conversation. By the way, why your father didn't teach you all this exercise beforehand? It would have given you quite an edge. I don't think the academy would care. Uriel shook his head again, singing. Oh yeah? Just because my father is an archmage, I have all the knowledge of the world at my fingertips, he said, gritting his teeth. I wish it was like that. Until my great-grandmother became a mage, our family was of commoners. The two things she passed down on his bloodline are the spite for nobles, no offense, he said, raising his hand in sign of apology towards Freya. None taken, she replied, but actually shivering with fear. The headmaster's words were finally clear to her. People like Lit would resent the nobles that abused their authority, and so would magic bloodlines. That's why the king is so hell-bent on changing the system, she thought. Over time, as nobles are isolating ourselves from these masses. If it keeps up like this, soon the status of noble will be like having a bounty on your head. And her hard-working nature, Uriel continued. In my family, the less you do, the farther you get from the line of succession. Some of my profligate siblings are as good as disowned, with no money or authority of their own. The reason why I'm the heir is because of my talent and efforts, and I could lose the title anytime if I start to slack off. When I asked my father to teach me the secrets of the academy, do you know how he replied? Uriel made a stern face, speaking with a low, harsh voice, mimicking Archmage Dearest demeanor. Son, your grandfather was just a noble, not even a mage. My foundations and resources for magic were nothing compared to what I gave you. If you cannot achieve as much as I did despite all that, teaching you is pointless. For our Creston family to prosper, you need to be able to walk with your own legs. Getting unfair advantages make you lazy and reliant on others' help. There are no shortcuts in life to achieve what really matters. Now go back to work. The whole table giggled. Uriel had got so immersed in his persona to yell the last part, drawing on him the looks of their neighbors. Realizing his slip-up, Uriel had become red, so Lid asked Freya about her tutor to cut him some slack. I asked her countless times, she sighed, but she always replied that our money was buying her services, not her loyalty, and that she had no intention of taking the smallest risk with the Mage Association for such a little sum. Freya scoffed. With the amount we paid her, we could have probably built a fortress. What about you, Quilla? Quilla was wolfing down her second serving of lasagna, looking at Lid's stick like a hungry tiger. The mouthful she had taken was so big for her to talk, so they had to wait for her to be able to swallow. I had no tutor, she explained while trying to wipe off the sausage from her face. The healer of our village had been killed by some bandit, so his books were available for everyone. I was an orphan, too weak to work in the field, so I began studying them. Once I understood magic, I became the next healer until the Duke that was managing the rebuild of the village heard about me. He built a house for me, and when I became old enough, he recommended me to the academy. You know the rest. She returned to give her meal all the care she could. The story is really impressive, Uriel said, but at the moment I'm so amazed by the amount of food you are eating that I cannot think about anything else. I swear she wasn't like this yesterday, Freya said. It must be Vastertonic, Lid said. She is shorter than me by a good head, yet she is eating more than me. I guess she needs a lot of food to catch up. Mind if I touch your head? Quilla violently blushed, tried to say something, but her mouth was full again, so she just nodded, lowering her head, Lid pretending to cast a spell while actually activating invigoration. Your muscles are severely undeveloped, and your bone density is terrible. You need to drink more milk for your skeleton. It's the first time I hear this, Uriel asked, with a curious look in his eyes. Mind to explain? Yeah, sure. How can I possibly explain the concept of vitamins, proteins, and calcium when your language lacks even the words necessary to describe them? Lid thought. It's an old saying from my village. Meat for the muscles, milk for the bones. How do you think I got so big at 12? Was what he actually said. Despite being 3 years older than him, Uriel was just a few centimeters taller than Lid, while Freya was 5 centimeters shorter than him. To Lid's amazement, the three of them ordered a bottle of milk each, starting to drink it instead of water. Suprememagus, Chapter 69, New Specializations. As soon as everyone finished eating, Lid left with the excuse of needing to prepare the final details for his first Forge Master lesson. The actual truth was that having a conversation with them about anything but magic made him want to rip his ears off. Damn. Now I remember why back on Earth I never took a babysitter's job, unless I was desperate for money. Kids are so annoying, always worried about what others think of them, obsessing themselves with the stupidest things. While he was walking towards his room, he noticed a group of 4, 1 girl and 3 boys, that had pinned another girl in a corner. Before Lid could walk away, the bullying quickly escalated in a beating. Lid never stopped walking. He just threw a glance at them, curling his upper lip in disgusted expression. Should we not help her? 4 against 1 is unfair, Solus asked. Life is unfair, Lid replied. I don't know, nor I care for her. Besides, what could I do? Even if I save her this time, as soon as I turn my back, they would beat her twice as hard for revenge. If she is so stupid to prefer getting beaten instead of taking a ballot, that's her problem. I don't plan on opening an idiot shelter. Back in his room, Lid took a long bath, discussing with Solus what they had learned from the book and how far it was safe to reveal his talent and mastery. Soon the first gong resounded, indicating that 15 minutes were left before the beginning of the next period. Lid flew all at full speed, discovering that the lesson would not take place into a classroom, but inside the Forge Mastering Training Hall, right beside the Alchemist Training Hall. When Lid landed, both the doors were still closed and many people were waiting outside. The students were mingling together. From what he could understand, the 2 specialization courses would take place simultaneously, allowing people to meet before and after the lesson. I'm really interested in the Master Alchemist course, Solus said. I think it would be perfect complement to Forge Mastering. Who knows, maybe we could even fuse them together, obtaining powerful single-use weapons for when we are out of mana. Lid's interest was piqued. Yeah, it would be great. Too bad I can't afford another specialization. That would mark me as an S-rank student. Besides, I can't be in 2 places at once. Solus' mind shrugged. That's not a problem. Since there's 2 of us, I'll piggyback on one of the students with my shape-shifting abilities. We'll get 2 specialization for the price of 1. Wish me luck. See you later. Before Lid could stutter a surprised reply, Solus had already left his finger. She turned into a snow-white blot, using the crowd as a cover while she got under the robe of a kid with the Master Alchemist textbook in his hand. Lid was so shocked that his mind went completely blank until the professors arrived and opened their respective doors. Lid followed inside the Forge Master Training Hall, still incredulous of Solus' sudden departure. Only the mocking laughter of one of his classmates managed to wake him from his daze. Luckily, it wasn't Lid the target, but another student that was whining about having forgotten his book. Lid immediately regained his focus. Keep calm, old man. This is just a small setback. We'll get her back in a couple of hours. Thanks to their mingling, he was still able to perceive Solus' presence in the next room. Just like her was able to keep moving since they were less than 100 meters apart. But because of the distance and the magical nature of the White Griffon Castle, They weren't able to share their minds as usual. It was like being in a crowd at a club event. They were still able to communicate, but it required effort. He could perceive that Solo's mind was paying attention to something. The other lesson seemed to have already started. Hello, boys and girls. My name is Professor Laika Wainmeyer, and I will be your instructor in the path towards becoming Forge Masters. My class will be different from all others you follow, because Forge Mastering is different from any kind of magic you have ever learned. You have just moved your first step in the 7th department of the White Griffon, the crafting department. Professor Laika was a woman in her early 30s, 1 meter 65 centimeters tall, with long black hair, with shades of red held up in a scion. She was wearing skin-tight working gloves that highlighted her long and nimble fingers. She didn't have her robe on, so it was impossible to hide her soft, luscious curves. Professor Laika was better endowed than Naliar in every aspect, and despite she wore no makeup, that made her heart-shaped face stand out even more. Her demeanor was less flashy and jovial than Naliar. Her calm and composed attitude were those of a mature woman, not of an exuberant girl. Lid could empathize with his male classmates that were gulping non-stop while staring at her with dumbfounded expression. Lucky me, Lid thought. Seems that my heart is too little for more than a crush at a time. I couldn't bear acting out as an idiot again. Laika paid no attention to the agape mouths and the bright red faces. Her students were barely teenagers. She was used at their first meet reaction. So many mages are so fixed on elemental magic that they never mention the arts of crafting to their students. So I applaud you for choosing a specialization too often inglorious and underestimated, instead of making things blow up with fire and lightning like most of your peers. Contrary to what you may have heard or imagined, forge mastering doesn't require a forge, a hammer, or ingredients. Sure, some proper magic-imbued items like mana crystals or the fur of a magical beast or monster can improve the results, but that's material for another lesson. Let's start with the basics. Who of you went ahead and learned about forge mastering from our book? It was mostly a rhetorical question. The books have been delivered just the day before, and between the classes and the self-study, she wasn't expecting much. Yet a couple of hands were raised. The early bird gets the worm. Good. Describe to the class how a generic forge mastering spell works. She was pointing at a 15-year-old boy with red hair, the only one to have raised his hands besides Lid. First you need to draw a circle, and he actually had skimmed the first pages and had raised his hand to make an impression on the professor. He never expected to be questioned. Laika shook her head. So typical of teenagers, always thinking with the head in the pants first. At least this time I got only 2 posers, she thought. You, with the mean eyes, mind to step in? Lid ignored the remark, replying promptly. Forge mastering requires drawing 2 magic circles, one inscribed into the other, with a series of magical runes between them. The number and type of runes depends on the nature of the enchantment to apply. The circles must be perfectly drawn with no imperfections, and even their radius matter. It must be as close as possible to the size of the item that is going to be enchanted. Laika whistled in surprise and approval. Very well said. Where is your book, by the way? It's all in here. Lit tapped his temple with the right index finger. No way I take it out. Until it's in Soluspedia, I can quote it word by word, he thought. Really? The professor raised an eyebrow in disbelief. Then do you mind drawing for the class dimensional amulet circle, page 22, diagram 4? She sneered. While everyone was flipping their books, Lit closed in to Laika, who pointed to him a flask holding a pungent smell liquid. I wish Solus was here. She would be laughing like a madwoman, mocking me for my know-it-all facade. For the first time in so many years, Lit felt alone, and he didn't like that feeling. Not one bit. The room was so silent that he could listen to the steady beating of his own heart. There was no voice in his head, cheering for him or trying to make him laugh. Everything felt pointless and hollow. With a series of gestures, several drops of the liquid flew in the air thanks to water magic, splashing on several points of the perfectly smooth, white stone table between Lit and the professor. The internal and external circles took form simultaneously, one drop moving clockwise and the other counterclockwise. The innermost circle had a radius of 10 centimeters, while the other had a 15 centimeters radius, leaving about 5 centimeters between them for the runes. Only after completing both circles and checking that there were no imperfections, Lit moved the remaining drops, forming one of the 13 runes at a time, devoting all of his focus on each one. When he finished, Professor Laika clapped her hands loudly, and after a second, the class unwillingly joined her. Bravo, she said. You weren't pretending. You really studied. Sorry if I doubted you. 30 points for your performance and 10 more as an apology. I guess I should have expected as much from Manoir's and Mart's new friend. At those words, all those who were planning about revenge or how humiliating Lit without incurring in the ballot immediately took 180 degrees turn. It was already hard hiring Manoir as it was. If angered, there was no telling how he would react. Not to mention that being the royal healer, he held an enormous amount of influence and political power. He just didn't care using it. It was better not to rattle his cage. If I ask you to, would you be able to continue the explanation? Yes, Lit answered, but I hadn't the time to go much further. Plus, I don't believe I fully grasped the contents. My exposition would be lacking depth and true knowledge. The first part was a lie, just to avoid standing out too much. Reading 20 pages wasn't much, but the whole book was another story. The second part, instead, was the truth. If books were enough, anyone could get infinite specialization simply by going to the Academy's library. Humble and honest to the boot, worthy of a forge master. Another 20 points for you, Lit. Feel free to gather around here, everyone. Since your classmate has gifted us with a perfect circle, it would be wasteful not to use it. I'll give you a practical demonstration of forge mastering. Suprememagus, Chapter 70, A Third Specialization. Professor Laika opened a desk drawer filled to the brim with cheap-looking pendants. We buy them in stocks, just like the rings, she said, picking one at random. The only way to differentiate the various rings is by the stones embedded within. Red for dimensional items, blue for Tier 1 magic storing rings, yellow for Tier 2, green for Tier 3. Tier 4 magic storing rings and above are not available in the prize halls. As it is just your average silver pendant. She placed it at the center of the innermost magic circle, and after that she called for help via her communication amulet and waited for assistance to come. Fun fact: the dimensional amulets are usually preferred to dimensional rings, since most mages prefer to have as many magic storing rings as they can. We still have to discover a way to use something other than rings for instant casting. The door of the classroom opened. A man and a woman dressed like the academy staff stepped in and took place behind the magical circle, starting to chant the same spell. With each cast, the space within the circle was filled with pure non-elemental mana, to the point that the air inside started to crackle and pop with power. The energy became dense enough to lit up the amulet from the table. To use a blacksmith analogy, the circle acts as a magical furnace, withholding the stored mana within and saturating the item that had to be enchanted. The circle must be perfect, or the mana would leak, leading to a defective product. She explained, the higher the mana density one creates, the better the item will be. But that also means that the Forge Master will consume a greater amount of mana for the enchantment. If the Forge Mastering spell used is weaker than the mana accumulated inside the circle, it will have no effect. A true Forge Master must always be aware of her limits or his limits. Balance is of the most importance in our line of work. If the mana density is too low, the item will be useless, too high, and it costs so much to not have a market value unless you do it for yourself, of course. When the assistants stopped chanting, Laika stepped forward, gesturing the students to move away. Then she started casting several consecutive spells. Both her hands and her voice almost never stopped. One by one, the runes that Lid had drawn between the circles started moving from their original positions, taking place around the amulet. They formed an energy sphere, absorbing the mana from the surrounding space and injecting it in the amulet. When the last rune completed the sphere, all the available mana had been compressed to the point of being barely able to enclose the pendant. With the final spell, Laika fused the sphere with the amulet. The runes shine on its surface for a few seconds before disappearing forever. Only then she took the amulet in her hand, showing the class the results of her efforts. This little thing here is a top quality dimensional amulet. Its value is about 340 points in the prize hall and above 300 gold coins if you were to buy it with cash. The idea of so much money condensed in such a little thing made even those born in wealthy families gasp in amazement. It was enough to build a manor and buy its land. Furniture and pieces of art to furnish it would take at least another amulet though. Now, here are a few things that books don't explain and that you may have missed during the whole process. I'm especially referring to those that paid more attention to my chest rising and lowering rather than to my brilliant performance. She glared to some of the male students whose faces turned into a bright purple while squealing excuses and apologies. Lid felt compassion for them. If it was Naliar instead of her, he would probably be in their shoes. The female students instead made fun of them, calling them perverts and other non-endearing terms. Professor Laika was fuming. There was only so much she was willing to bear, even from teenagers. She took pride in her talent and deep expertise. Being treated like a slab of meat was the worst insult anyone could do to her. She covered her chest with her arms before taking a deep breath to calm down in order to continue. Not everyone is able to become a forge master. That's because, together with the war mage, is the specialization that requires the greatest mana capacity. While for a war mage, it determines how much destruction they can bring. Without a huge amount of mana, a forge master cannot create the most powerful enchanted items in our repertoire. Mana capacity is needed, not only to overcome the high mana density required for a great item, but also because every single rune requires its own spell to be engraved in the object. Each spell is relatively simple and short, but you must need to be able to cast them in a rapid succession without delay. This because as soon as the magical furnace is loaded, the mana tries to escape, and even a perfect circle can only hold on for a while. Usually, after 10 seconds, the circle destabilizes and the mana begins to leak. This means that I had to cast 13 spells, one for each rune, plus another to permanently imprint the energies in the amulet, for a total of 14 spells. Each of them was able to overcome the mana density, and I had to do everything within 10 seconds, or I would have just wasted a lot of mana for nothing. Bear in mind that once an object is saturated by mana, if the forge mastering process fails, it cannot be repeated. The energy remnants from the previous failure will still linger, making any further attempts a waste of time. Even this castle is the product of the work of countless forge masters. Every single stone has been enchanted before assembling them as you see it today. Otherwise, it would be impossible to imbue with magic something this big. And that is just the first requirement. The second is that a forge master must be a jack of all trades, no matter if she or he is a master of none. In my line of work, I need to be proficient in all the 6 elements. You will also need patience, love for research, and a strong build. Manipulating this magnitude of energy is not something pipsqueaks can afford to do, not without incurring in permanent damages that would accumulate over time. Lee rose his hand. Yes, I can understand most of the items I saw in the prize hall and link their properties with 6 elements. But I don't get how warp steps and dimensional items work. What element do they belong to? Excellent question. The answer is to all of them. The only force that can bend space and time is gravity. Powerful forge masters of the past discovered that air and earth magic are the bare minimum to create such powerful gravity. But to stabilize it, to make such items not only reproducible but also to allow fine control over them, all elements were required. It's a field of research that has never gone dry. There are still so many things to explain. I think I understand, Lee thought. They need the electromagnetic waves from the lightning to resonate with the gravitational pull earth magic generates and enhance it to bend time and space. Fire and water magic probably allow to avoid side effects like the formations of vacuum, overheating, or freezing while creating such powerful gravitational force. I can't even fathom that darkness and light are used for, though. They didn't exist back on Earth. Science can help me with them. During the rest of the lesson, Professor Laika proceeded to explain how they would manage the rest of the course. She couldn't allow any of them inside the training hall again until they have learned the theory behind forge mastering. Having students messing around with magic circles was too dangerous, since high-density mana was highly volatile and could cause huge explosions if not controlled properly. After that, they would need to memorize all the basic runes and how to combine them until being able to produce all the basic enchanted items. Only those who passed all the tests would be admitted to the 5th year, learning how to add multiple properties to a single item. By the end of the lesson, Lit was fuming like a volcano ready to explode. Being in the first row helped him to better understand Professor Laika's teachings, noticing the final details about how to draw runes. At the same time, though, he was also able to feel the pressure coming from all his classmates standing behind him. In normal conditions, he would find disgusting the idea of being surrounded by strangers, hearing their whispers and being the subjects to their glares. Yet he would bear it all. But since his manacore and body were at odds, constantly fighting and messing with his mind, it was much harder for him to control his reactions and hide his emotions. It was Solo's voice and presence that helped him praying and paying them no need, using their bond to suit his most violent reactions. So in the last 2 hours, though, they had been separated, and now Lit was forced to wait for her outside the training hall since the master alchemist lesson had yet to finish. It was really irritating for him standing alone in a crowd for the upteenth time since his first life. Even during high school, Lit had been always different from his peers, focused on paying the bills instead of goofing around. Seeing their carefree attitude, how easy it was for them to relax and make friends, made him grin with envy. Suddenly, the alchemist training hall opened, and a small insect came out of it, reaching Lit's leg unnoticed and then turning into a liquid, going back towards his hand. Sorry it took so long, but everyone made so many questions that the professor forced everyone to stay behind. Want to grab something to eat? Solus asked.